A dog carried a black garbage bag into the hospital, and no one could believe what was inside. At first, everyone thought it was trash, until the nurse opened it and froze. Inside wasn't what anyone expected. It was something that should have never been thrown away. Within minutes, alarms were sounding, security was scrambling, and one person realized the truth could destroy everything the hospital was hiding. But the deeper she looked, the more dangerous it became. Because someone wanted that bag gone, and they'd do anything to keep it buried. Now, with lives on the line and secrets about to surface, what did that dog just uncover? And who's willing to kill to keep it secret? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The wind howled like a wounded animal as Lark Jennings pulled her scrub jacket tighter around her shoulders. Through the emergency room's sliding glass doors, she could see the snow coming down in thick, angry sheets. The brutal winter storm had already dropped 8 inches of snow, and it showed no signs of letting up. A sharp bark cut through the usual bustle of the ER. Lark's head snapped up just in time to see Ash, her German Shepherd mix, bolt past the nurse's station. His nails clicked rapidly against the linoleum as he raced toward the loading dock. "Ash, wait!" Lark called out, breaking into a run. The dog had never acted like this before. As a former rescue dog, Ash was usually the picture of calm and discipline. She followed him through the winding corridors of Haviland Regional Hospital, her rubber-soled shoes squeaking on the wet floor. The loading dock area was dimly lit and smelled of industrial cleaner and wet cardboard. Ash stood near a pile of black garbage bags, pawing at one insistently. "What is it, boy?" Lark asked, breathing heavily from the chase. Ash grabbed the bag in his powerful jaws and began dragging it back toward the main hospital corridor, leaving a trail of melting snow and water in his wake. Several staff members stopped to stare as Ash pulled his prize into the triage bay. Sarah, one of the unit clerks, raised an eyebrow. "Lark, your dog's gone dumpster diving." But Lark barely heard her. Something about Ash's urgency, the deliberate way he'd chosen this particular bag, made her pulse quicken. She knelt beside the bag as Ash released it, his amber eyes fixed intently on her face. With trembling fingers, Lark untied the plastic knot. The first thing she saw was a cracked smartphone, its screen spiderwebbed but still intact. Beneath it lay a stack of hospital wristbands, the white ones with purple stripes that marked patients for comfort care. But these weren't used bands. They were blank, pre-filled with dates and times, but no patient names. "What in the world?" she muttered, digging deeper. Her hand closed around a small notebook, its pages dampened by snow but still readable. Opening it, she found lists of names, each followed by a series of numbers and letters that made no immediate sense. Rodriguez, M, CB4, 1215, Chen, A, CB2, 1216, Washington, K, CB3, 1214. The codes meant nothing to her, but something about their methodical arrangement sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the winter storm raging outside. With shaking hands, Lark picked up the damaged phone. To her surprise, it powered on. The screen flickered to life, showing a video player paused on a dark image. Heart pounding, she pressed play. The footage was shaky, clearly taken in secret. It showed a hospital hallway, this hospital's hallway, where an elderly man lay on a stretcher. He was clearly in distress, his chest heaving with labored breaths. But what made Lark's blood run cold was how the staff walked past him. Again and again, nurses and doctors moved through the frame, but no one stopped. No one helped. The man's hand reached out, pleading, but it was as if he were invisible. The video ended with the man's hand falling limply to his side. Lark felt the blood drain from her face. "This can't be happening," she whispered. Ash pressed against her leg, offering silent support as her mind raced to make sense of what she was seeing. The sound of approaching footsteps made her look up. Dr. Marcus Chen, the ER's administrative director, stood there with Linda Haskell, the hospital's risk management officer. Their faces hardened as they took in the scattered contents of the garbage bag. "Nurse Jennings," Linda said, her voice clipped. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Lark stood up, still clutching the phone. "I found evidence of—" she began, but Dr. Chen cut her off. "That appears to be hospital property," he said smoothly. "I'll need you to hand everything over immediately." "But there's a video here of a patient being neglected," Lark protested, her voice rising. "And these wristbands, they're predated. The ledger—" "Nurse Jennings," Linda interrupted, "I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for whatever you think you found. However, going through disposed hospital materials is a serious breach of protocol." Dr. Chen stepped forward, hand extended. "The items, please." Lark looked between them, noting their rigid postures and careful expressions. These were people she'd worked with for years, people she'd trusted. But now something in their eyes made her instinctively step back. Ash moved with her, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "I need to report this," Lark said firmly, though her voice shook slightly. "Something's wrong here, and you both know it." "What's wrong?" Linda said icily. "Is an employee making unfounded accusations based on garbage she shouldn't have been touching in the first place. Dr. Chen, perhaps we should call security?" Before anyone could move, a code blue announcement blared through the speakers, calling all available staff to the 4th floor. Dr. Chen's jaw tightened. "This isn't over," he said, turning on his heel. Linda followed, shooting Lark a warning look over her shoulder. Left alone in the triage bay, Lark looked down at Ash, who sat alert at her feet, his eyes never leaving the direction the administrators had gone. The evidence was scattered around them like pieces of a horrible puzzle. The cracked phone with its damning video, the pre-filled wristbands that suggested premeditation, the coded ledger that hinted at something systematic. The storm outside rattled the windows, but the real chill was inside now. Lark had always believed in the hospital's mission to help people, to save lives. But what she'd just discovered suggested something dark lurking beneath that noble surface. Ash pressed his warm body against her legs, as if sensing her distress. She reached down to scratch behind his ears, grateful for his steady presence. "What have you helped me uncover, boy?" she whispered. The PA system crackled again, calling for more staff to assist with the code blue. Around her, the ER continued its normal rhythm of controlled chaos, but nothing felt normal anymore. The evidence at her feet told a story of deliberate negligence, of lives possibly lost not through accident or unavoidable circumstance, but through choice. Lark gathered the items quickly, stuffing them into her scrub pockets. She couldn't trust hospital administration with this evidence. That much was clear from their reaction. But what could she do with it? Who could she trust? The weight of the phone seemed to burn through her pocket as she moved through her remaining shift, going through the motions of patient care while her mind raced. Ash stayed close, his protective instincts on high alert. Every time Linda Haskell or Dr. Chen appeared in the ER, he positioned himself between them and Lark, a silent guardian keeping watch. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside Haviland Regional Hospital, Lark felt a different kind of storm brewing. Whatever she had discovered, whatever conspiracy Ash had helped her uncover, she knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. Lark's hands trembled as she gathered the scattered evidence. The weight of what she'd discovered pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She needed help, someone with authority who could take action. Her mind immediately went to Cassian Pike, the head of security. He had a reputation for being fair and level-headed, exactly what she needed right now. She found Pike in his office, a sparse room with security monitors lining one wall. He looked up from his desk, his expression calm and watchful as always. Ash padded in beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. "Mr. Pike," Lark said, closing the door behind her. "I need your help with something serious." Pike gestured to the chair across from his desk. "What's on your mind, Nurse Jennings?" Lark placed the garbage bag on his desk, its contents still damp from the forced snow. "Ash found this at the loading dock. There's something wrong here, really wrong." Her fingers shook as she pulled out the cracked phone. "There's a video you need to see." Pike's face remained neutral as he watched the video of the dying man in the hallway. Only a slight tightening around his eyes betrayed his reaction. He examined the pre-filled wristbands next, turning them over in his large hands. "These are dated ahead of time," he noted, his voice carefully controlled. "Yes, and look at this ledger." Lark spread out the pages. "It's all in code, but these numbers, they match up with dates and patient numbers. Something's happening to these patients, Mr. Pike." Before Pike could respond, the office door opened. Tilda Bracken swept in, her designer suit immaculate despite the storm outside. Dr. Cal Sloan followed, his silver hair slightly disheveled, looking uncomfortable. "Ah, there you are," Bracken said, her smile too perfect, too practiced. "I see you've brought our training materials to Mr. Pike." Lark stared at her. "Training materials?" "Yes, of course." Bracken's voice was smooth as glass. "We're developing new protocols for end-of-life care. These are mock-ups for staff training." "Mock-ups?" Lark's voice cracked. "That video shows a real person dying alone in a hallway." "That was a simulation video," Bracken countered smoothly. "For teaching purposes." Dr. Sloan cleared his throat. "Nurse Jennings, I understand your concern, but perhaps you should focus on your duties in the ER. We're short-staffed as it is with this storm." Pike looked between them, his expression guarded. "Mrs. Bracken, these wristbands are dated for next week." "Part of the simulation scenario," Bracken replied, without missing a beat. "Really, this has all been blown out of proportion. Mr. Pike, I'll take those materials now." Lark watched in helpless frustration as Pike gathered the items. His hands hesitated for just a moment over the ledger, long enough for Ash to dart forward and grab a page in his teeth, tearing it free. The sudden movement startled everyone, and in the confusion, Lark managed to slip the torn page into her pocket. "That dog shouldn't be in this office," Bracken snapped, her perfect composure cracking slightly. "Or anywhere in this hospital, for that matter." "He's a certified therapy dog," Lark said firmly, her hand resting on Ash's head. The paper in her pocket felt like it was burning through her scrubs. "Nurse Jennings," Dr. Sloan said, his voice tired but firm, "I believe you have patients waiting. We'll handle this matter." Pike handed the bag and its contents to Bracken, his face unreadable. But as Lark turned to leave, she caught his eye. Something passed between them, a brief moment of understanding, perhaps even apology. Out in the hallway, Lark leaned against the wall, her heart pounding. Ash pressed against her legs, his warmth anchoring her. She pulled out the torn ledger page, studying the coded entries with new determination. They might have dismissed her concerns, but she knew what she'd seen. That video wasn't a simulation. Those wristbands weren't for training. Something sinister was happening at Haviland Regional, and no one in authority intended to investigate. The hospital intercom crackled to life, calling her back to the ER. Lark tucked the paper away carefully and straightened her scrubs. She had proof now, one small piece of evidence they hadn't managed to take from her. She just had to figure out what to do with it. Ash walked beside her as she headed back to her station, his posture alert and protective. Around them, the hospital carried on its normal routines, but nothing felt normal anymore. Behind the professional smiles and polite dismissals, Lark had glimpsed something darker. The question now was, what would it cost her to expose it? The storm outside had intensified, rattling the windows with fierce gusts. But Lark barely noticed as she moved through her duties, her mind racing. The torn ledger page seemed to weigh heavier with each passing hour. She caught glimpses of Bracken throughout her shift, the COO's heels clicking purposefully through the corridors, that artificial smile firmly in place. Dr. Sloan avoided the ER entirely, sending residents to handle his consults. Pike appeared briefly during her break, ostensibly checking security cameras. He didn't speak to her, but his eyes lingered on her pocket where she'd stored the ledger page. His expression remained carefully neutral, but something in his stance suggested he wasn't entirely convinced by Bracken's explanation either. Ash stayed close, growling softly whenever Bracken or one of her administrative staff passed too near. His instincts had led them to the truth once. Lark trusted they would help guide her through whatever came next. For now, she had patients who needed her, lives that depended on her attention and care. But the torn page in her pocket reminded her that some threats to those lives might come from within the hospital itself. The storm's fury seemed to match Lark's internal turmoil as she returned to the bustling emergency room. Rain lashed against the windows while thunder rattled the fluorescent lights overhead. The ER intake area was packed. Wet, miserable patients filled every chair, their clothes dripping onto the linoleum floors. Something caught her attention at the triage desk. Nancy, the intake nurse, was attaching different colored wristbands to patients. Nothing unusual about that, except these weren't the standard hospital bands. These were thinner, with a distinctive black stripe along the edge, just like the ones from the garbage bag. Lark moved closer, pretending to check the vital signs board. An elderly man with chest pain received a blue band. A teenage girl with a broken arm got white. A middle-aged woman clutching her stomach got yellow. The colors seemed random until Lark noticed Nancy consulting a laminated chart before choosing each band. "Insurance information?" Nancy asked the elderly man. "Medicare," he replied, wheezing slightly. Nancy nodded and made a note. Blue band. The teenager's parents had premium coverage through the father's job. White band. The woman with abdominal pain shifted uncomfortably. I don't have insurance right now. Lost my job last month." Yellow band. Lark's hand went to her pocket, feeling the crumpled ledger page. She pulled it out discreetly, studying the coded entries while pretending to review charts. Each line had 2 letters followed by a color code. MIB-TCW up Y. Her breath caught. MI, Medicare insurance. TC, total coverage. Up, uninsured patient. The codes matched the wristbands perfectly. "Code gray to the ER waiting room," crackled over the intercom. Security guards appeared within minutes, surrounding a man who was becoming increasingly agitated. "I've been waiting 4 hours!" he shouted, holding his swollen arm. "It's infected! I need antibiotics!" Lark checked his wristband. Yellow. "Sir, we've explained that other cases have priority," the guard said firmly. "If you continue to be disruptive, we'll have to ask you to leave." "Priority? That kid with the sprained ankle got seen before me." He gestured wildly at a departing patient wearing a white band. "Sir, final warning," the guard stated. "Leave voluntarily or we'll escort you out." The man's shoulders slumped. He looked at his yellow band, then at Lark with defeated eyes. This is because I don't have insurance, isn't it? Before Lark could respond, Pike appeared. I'll walk you out, sir. The urgent care clinic on 5th Street has a sliding scale payment system. Lark watched them go, fury building in her chest. She grabbed a chart and approached Nancy. That man needed IV antibiotics. His infection could get dangerous if it's not treated. Nancy wouldn't meet her eyes. Just following the new protocols, Lark. You know how it is. No, I don't know how it is, Lark said sharply. Since when do we turn away patients who need care? Nurse Jennings. Dr. Sloane's voice cut through the tension. A word. He led her to a quiet corner of the nurses' station. Your concerns about patient care are admirable, but you need to trust the system. The system? Lark's voice shook. We're coding patients based on their ability to pay. That's illegal. Lower your voice, he hissed. Look, these are complex administrative decisions that don't concern floor staff. Focus on the patients you're assigned to treat. But what about the ones we're not treating? That man could develop sepsis. This is your official warning, Nurse Jennings. Any further disruption of hospital protocols will result in disciplinary action. Lark opened her mouth to argue, but movement caught her eye. Tilda Bracken stood watching from the doorway, her expression calculating. The COO beckoned Lark over with one manicured finger. Walk with me, Bracken said pleasantly. Too pleasantly. They moved down a quiet hallway, their footsteps echoing. Your mother's knee replacement is scheduled for next week, isn't it? Lark's stomach dropped. Yes. Elective surgeries are so complicated to schedule, Bracken continued. One small issue with insurance pre-approval or operating room availability, and suddenly there's a 3-month delay. She stopped walking and turned to face Lark. It would be a shame if your mother had to wait that long. All that pain. The threat was clear as crystal. Lark's hands clenched into fists. I'm sure you understand, Bracken said softly, that sometimes we need to look at the bigger picture. Focus on the greater good. Your mother's surgery will proceed as scheduled, as long as you remember your place. She patted Lark's arm. Have a good shift. Lark stood frozen as Bracken's heels clicked away down the hall. The ledger page felt heavy in her pocket, proof of a system designed to profit from suffering. But now she understood the true cost of exposing it. Thunder crashed outside as another ambulance pulled up to the bay. The paramedics wheeled in an unconscious woman, maybe 50 years old, with severe chest pain. No ID, no insurance card. Nancy reached for a yellow band. Lark watched, helpless, as the woman was directed to a hallway bed until a room opens up. She knew no room would open. The woman's chance of receiving proper cardiac care had been decided the moment that yellow band went on her wrist. The storm raged on outside, but the real tempest was building in Lark's heart. She had proof now, undeniable evidence that Haviland Regional was systematically deciding who deserved to live or die based on their insurance status. But acting on that proof could cost her mother dearly. Ash pressed against her legs, whining softly. He seemed to sense her distress as she stood watching the yellow-banded woman's heart monitor beep steadily in the hallway. Each beat felt like an accusation. Cassian Pike sat in the dimly lit security office, his eyes fixed on the flickering monitors before him. The clock read 2:15 in the morning, but sleep was the furthest thing from his mind. Something about that black garbage bag and Nurse Jennings' discovery wouldn't let him rest. He pulled up the archived footage from previous winter storms, methodically scanning through hours of hallway feeds. The routine was familiar. He'd done this countless times for missing items or suspicious behavior. But tonight felt different. Computer, display camera 7-B, December 12th, he commanded, fingers tapping against his coffee mug. The screen flickered to life, showing the emergency department hallway during last month's ice storm. 2:37 a.m. Normal activity. 2:38 a.m. Nurses rushing with supplies. 2:39 a.m. Screen goes black. Cassian sat up straighter. "Rewind 10 seconds," he muttered. The footage played again. This time he watched the timestamp carefully. The gap lasted exactly 47 minutes. Could be a power surge, he reasoned aloud, but his military training had taught him to trust his gut, and his gut was screaming that this wasn't a coincidence. He pulled up another storm date from 2 months ago. Same pattern, normal footage until the emergency department got overwhelmed, then mysterious gaps spanning almost an hour. Each time, the outages coincided with what the hospital dubbed Code Black, their designation for severe weather emergencies. The door creaked open, making him jump. Lark Jennings stood in the doorway, still in her scrubs despite the late hour. "Can't sleep either?" she asked quietly. Cassian hesitated. Sharing security footage with hospital staff was against protocol. But he'd seen the fire in her eyes when she'd found that bag. The same determination he'd once felt as a young MP facing institutional corruption. "Take a look at this," he said, gesturing her over. "Every major storm for the past 6 months. Same pattern." Lark leaned in, her expression intense as he showed her the gaps. "During Code Black," she whispered, "when the ER is most chaotic." She pulled the crumpled ledger page from her pocket. The dates match. They shared a look of grim understanding. This was bigger than a few missing security feeds. "I've been tracking the colored wristbands," Lark continued. "Yellow means no insurance or minimal coverage. Those patients—" She swallowed hard. "They disappear during the gaps." "Disappear?" Cassian's voice was sharp. "Discharged against medical advice, transferred to phantom facilities, or just gone." Her hands clenched. "But the evidence vanishes with them." A noise in the hallway made them both freeze. Heavy footsteps approached, then the distinctive squeak of a janitor's cart. Hugo Trammell appeared, his weathered face half hidden by the shadow of his cap. "Evening," he mumbled, beginning to empty the trash. He paused at the security desk, eyes darting to the monitors. "Watching the storms again?" Something in his tone made Cassian look closer. "You've noticed something?" Hugo's movements slowed. He glanced down the empty hallway before speaking barely above a whisper. "Bags like that one your dog found?" He nodded at Lark. "Not the first time I've seen them. Always during the big storms. Always near loading dock C." Lark's breath caught. "What happened to them?" "Can't say for sure." Hugo's voice was careful. "But I work the late shift. Been here 15 years. Used to be a tech before." He trailed off. "Let's just say asking questions isn't always healthy around here." "Please," Lark pressed. "People are dying." Hugo was quiet for a long moment, methodically wiping down the desk. Finally, he spoke so softly they had to lean in to hear. "Check the maintenance tunnels. Between 2 and 3 a.m. during Code Black. That's all I can say." He shuffled away with his cart, leaving them in stunned silence. Cassian turned back to his monitors, pulling up the tunnel camera feeds. Most showed only static. "These cameras have been disabled," he muttered, "officially marked as non-essential during storms." "Convenient," Lark said bitterly. She pointed to the screen showing loading dock C. "Can you access older footage from there?" Cassian typed rapidly, bypassing several security protocols. "Here, last month's storm." They watched as shadowy figures moved through the loading dock, carrying black bags similar to the one Ash had found. The timestamp matched the footage gap in the ER cameras perfectly. "We need to get into those tunnels during the next storm," Lark said firmly. Cassian studied her face. This could cost us both our jobs. Or worse, based on what they threatened about your mother's surgery. I know. Lark's voice was steady, despite her obvious fear. But how many more people will die if we don't act? Thunder rumbled outside, making them both jump. The weather report had predicted another major storm system moving in within 48 hours. I'll help, Cassian said finally. But we need to be smart about this. They've obviously been covering their tracks for months, maybe years. Lark nodded. We need proof they can't make disappear. Multiple copies, multiple locations. And we need to figure out who else we can trust. Cassian glanced in the direction Hugo had gone. There might be others who've seen things, but were too afraid to speak up. They spent the next hour documenting everything they'd found. The camera gaps, the wristband patterns, the loading dock footage. Lark copied her ledger page, and Cassian secured the files on an encrypted drive. I'll take copies home, Lark said, and leave some with my roommate, just in case. The unspoken weight of that just in case hung heavy between them. They both knew they were crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. As Lark turned to leave, Cassian called after her softly. Be careful who you talk to. Even the walls have ears in this place. She nodded grimly. You too, and thank you for believing me. Thank your dog, Cassian replied with a hint of a smile. He's the one who started all this. But as he watched her walk away, Cassian's smile faded. He turned back to the monitors, studying the countless faces passing through the ER. How many had been marked with yellow bands? How many had vanished into those mysterious gaps in the footage? The storm was coming. And this time, they would be ready. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Lark hurried down the sterile corridor, her footsteps echoing against the polished floor. Her heart raced, but not from the brisk pace. In her pocket, she felt the weight of several yellow pre-printed Comfort Care wristbands she'd managed to collect, each one a potential death sentence she was determined to prevent. Hey! Sarah Martinez, one of the ER nurses Lark had cautiously confided in, caught up with her. Room 312. Male cardiac patient, 62 years. Old. They already tagged him. Lark's jaw tightened. Insurance status? Expired last month. Lost his job due to health issues. Sarah's voice dropped lower. They're calling it resource allocation during crisis conditions. Through the window, Lark could see the man, pale, scared, clutching his chest. His yellow wristband seemed to glow accusingly under the harsh lights. His wife sat beside him, worry etched deep in her face. Not this time, Lark muttered. She pulled out her phone and texted Cassian. Room 312. Need eyes dark. Minutes later, her phone vibrated. Camera loop set. 10 minutes max. Mei Chen, another nurse who'd joined their small resistance, appeared with fresh admission papers. Ready when you are. Lark took a deep breath and nodded to Hugo, who was mopping nearby, their faithful lookout. He positioned his cart to partially block the hallway view. With practiced efficiency, the three women entered the room. While Sarah distracted the patient and his wife with questions about his medication history, Lark and May executed their carefully rehearsed switch. Lark's steady hands removed the yellow band, replacing it with a standard white one. May updated the charts, changing just enough to ensure proper treatment without raising immediate suspicion. Sir, we need to move you to cardiac monitoring, Lark announced, her voice professionally calm despite her pounding heart. Standard procedure for chest pain patients. The man's wife looked relieved. Thank goodness. They told us earlier they might have to transfer him. Change of plans, Lark smiled reassuringly. We've got a bed opening up. As they wheeled him toward the cardiac unit, Lark caught Hugo's slight nod. all clear. Cassian's voice crackled through her earpiece. Camera feeds normal in 3, 2, 1. They delivered the patient safely to the cardiac unit, where the staff, unaware of the earlier comfort care designation, immediately began proper treatment protocols. Hours later, Lark stood outside the cardiac unit, watching through the window as the man's color improved under proper care. His wife had fallen asleep in the chair beside him, their hands intertwined. He would have died. Cassian's quiet voice made her jump. He'd appeared silently beside her, his security uniform immaculate as always. The initial EKG showed significant blockage, without intervention. I know. Lark's voice was barely a whisper. That's what makes this whole system so horrifying. They're choosing who lives and dies based on paperwork. We did good today, Cassian affirmed, but his expression was troubled. But they're going to notice. The security logs show credential use patterns. Even with the camera loops, there's still electronic footprints. Let them look, Lark said firmly, though her hands trembled slightly. Every life we save is worth it. Sarah appeared around the corner, her face tense. Lark, Tilda's asking questions. She's reviewing. Admission records from the past 24 hours. Already? Cassian frowned. That's faster than usual. Someone must have tipped her off, May added, joining them. Her normally composed features showed strain. We need to be more careful. Hugo shuffled past, deliberately dragging his mop. As he passed, he murmured, "Suits in the security office, pulling footage." Lark felt cold dread settle in her stomach, but she straightened her spine. We knew this could happen. We all agreed the risk was worth it. They'll watch us more closely now, Cassian warned. Every move, every login, every patient interaction. Then we'll have to be smarter, Lark replied. Find new ways, different paths. Sarah squeezed her arm. We're with you. That man in there? He has grandchildren who still have their grandfather because of what we did today. They dispersed carefully, returning to their duties as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Their small act of defiance had saved a life and painted targets on their backs. Later that evening, Lark caught snippets of conversation as she passed the administrative offices. Unauthorized access, security protocols, disciplinary action. In the break room, she found a memo announcing mandatory compliance training for all staff. The message was clear. They were watching. But as she finished her shift, Lark passed room 312 again. The patient was sleeping peacefully, vital signs strong and stable. His wife looked up and smiled, mouthing a silent "thank you" through the window. Lark smiled back, her resolve strengthening. Let them watch. Let them suspect. As long as there were people being marked for death by yellow wristbands, she and her small band of allies would find ways to fight back. She headed for the locker room, already thinking about tomorrow's battles. The surveillance might be tighter now, but they had something their opponents didn't. The fierce, unwavering certainty that every life was worth saving. Cassian's warning echoed in her mind as she gathered her things. Be careful. They're watching now. But as she looked at the family photo taped inside her locker, her mother's smiling face, Lark knew she couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. The risk to herself, her job, even her mother's upcoming surgery, was worth it to prevent another family from losing someone they loved to this cruel system. The night shift was beginning, bringing with it new patients, new yellow wristbands, new battles to fight. But they weren't alone anymore. In the shadows of Haviland Regional, a small resistance was growing, united by the simple belief that every patient deserved a chance to live. She tapped her phone, sending a coded message to their secure group chat. Tomorrow's another day. Stay strong, stay safe, stay human. The responses came quickly. A heart emoji from Sarah, a thumbs up from May, a simple "copy that" from Cassian. Hugo wouldn't respond, he never did. But she knew, he'd seen it. Outside, storm clouds were gathering again. But this time, they were ready. Whatever came next, they would face it together, one yellow wristband at a time. The fluorescent lights in the hospital's administrative conference room cast harsh shadows across Tilda Bracken's face as she slid the disciplinary notice across the polished table. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against the wood in a steady, menacing rhythm. Insubordination, Nurse Jennings. Multiple violations of hospital protocol, unauthorized access to patient records, interference with prescribed care plans. Tilda's voice carried the chill of a morgue freezer. The board has no choice but to place you on immediate suspension, pending review. Lark's throat tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. Those prescribed care plans were death sentences. That's exactly the kind of inflammatory rhetoric that concerns us. Tilda's smile never reached her eyes. You'll turn in your badge and access card immediately. Security will escort you out. As if on cue, two unfamiliar security guards appeared at the door, not Cassian or any of the regular staff. Lark noticed their hands hovering near their tasers. The suspension is effective for 2 weeks, Tilda continued. We'll review your status at that time. I suggest you use this period to reflect on your priorities. The unspoken threat about her mother's surgery hung in the air between them. Lark surrendered her credentials, her fingers trembling slightly as she placed them on the table. The plastic badge made a small clicking sound that seemed to echo in the sterile room. The walk through the hospital corridors felt surreal. Co-workers averted their eyes. Even those who had supported her yesterday suddenly found fascinating things to study on their clipboards or screens. Only Sarah dared to meet her gaze, offering a tiny nod of solidarity. In the locker room, Lark gathered her personal belongings. Her hands brushed against the torn ledger page hidden in her bag's inner pocket. The evidence that had started everything. At least they hadn't found that. The security cameras in the hallway pivoted to follow her progress. But when she glanced at the monitors behind the main desk, they showed only static. Strange. The system had been working perfectly this morning. Ash waited by her car in the parking garage, his tail wagging as she approached. She'd started bringing him to work after finding the bag, trusting his instincts more than ever. At least they can't suspend you, buddy. The garage was eerily quiet, the storm outside muffling the usual hospital sounds. Lark's footsteps echoed between the concrete pillars as she walked to her car. Something felt off. The hair on the back of her neck stood up. Ash suddenly tensed beside her, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Before Lark could process what was happening, he lunged forward, yanking hard on his leash. The force pulled her backward just as a dark sedan came screaming around the corner. The car missed her by inches, close enough that she felt the rush of air against her face. It accelerated toward the exit, tires squealing on the concrete. Lark's legs gave out, and she sank to the ground, her heart hammering against her ribs. Ash pressed against her, still growling, his body trembling with protective energy. "I got it!" Cassian's voice echoed through the garage as he sprinted toward them. He held up his phone. "My dashcam caught the whole thing. License plate and everything." He helped Lark to her feet, his steady hands grounding her as the adrenaline made her shake. "That was a hospital fleet vehicle," he said grimly. "I recognize the plate series." "They really tried to—" Lark couldn't finish the sentence. The reality of what had just happened, what had almost happened, hit her like a physical blow. "This isn't a game anymore," Cassian said quietly. "They're willing to kill to keep this quiet." "The cameras." Lark looked up at the garage's security cameras. all dead, their red recording lights dark. They knew exactly when to strike. "The system's been having technical difficulties all afternoon," Cassian confirmed. "Convenient timing, but they didn't count on my personal dashcam." He showed her the footage, the black sedan emerging from the shadows, accelerating directly toward where she had been standing. The plate number was clearly visible as it sped away. "We need to be more careful now," Cassian said, scanning the garage with professional vigilance. "They're not just trying to silence you anymore. They're trying to eliminate you." Lark hugged Ash, burying her face in his fur. "Thank you, boy. You saved my life." The dog licked her cheek, his warm presence steadying her nerves. "I'll walk you home," Cassian offered. "And Lark, maybe it's time to take this evidence to someone outside the hospital, someone they can't control." She nodded, still shaking. "I'll copy the ledger page tonight. We need multiple copies in safe places." They walked to her car together, Cassian scanning their surroundings with military precision. Ash stayed close to Lark's side, his protective instincts still on high alert. The security cameras remained dark, their lenses like blind eyes in the dimness of the garage. But now their silence spoke volumes. The conspiracy wasn't just about patient care anymore, it was about murder. As they reached her car, Lark's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Tilda's having all the security footage from today archived. Says it's for system maintenance." "They're covering their tracks," Cassian said, reading over her shoulder. "But they don't know about my footage yet." "Keep it safe," Lark warned. "They'll come for that next." She got into her car, Ash jumping into the back seat. Cassian stood watch until she started the engine, then followed her home in his own vehicle, making sure no other hospital cars appeared. The suspension notice felt heavy in her bag, but not as heavy as the knowledge that they had tried to kill her. The game had changed. The stakes were life and death now, not just for the patients, but for anyone who dared to expose the truth. The storm clouds overhead finally broke, rain hammering against her windshield. But the real storm was just beginning. They had shown their hand today, revealed how far they would go to protect their secret. Now she knew exactly what she was fighting against, and she was still alive to fight. The hospital's tech lab smelled of coffee and electronics. Cassian hunched over his workstation, surrounded by monitors casting a blue glow across his concentrated face. Lark paced behind him, her fingers twisting the hem of her scrub top. "The phone was pretty damaged," Cassian explained, his fingers moving steadily across the keyboard. "But the memory card survived. I'm running recovery software now." Lark watched file names populate the screen. "How long until—" "Got it." Cassian straightened. "Several video files, mostly corrupted. But this one—" He clicked, and the screen filled with a shaky image. The footage showed a dimly lit hospital hallway. The camera moved unsteadily, clearly held by someone trying to remain unseen. A man's labored breathing could be heard. "They're doing it again," a hoarse voice whispered. "Marking them. Deciding who lives." A wet cough interrupted his words. The camera turned, showing a reflection in a window. Lark's heart stopped. "Dad?" The word escaped her in a broken whisper. The man in the reflection was gaunt, his face lined with exhaustion, but there was no mistaking Colum Reyes. The silver pendant he always wore, a St. Christopher medal, glinted at his throat. The video continued as Colum made his way down the hall, documenting empty nurse stations and patients left unattended. His breathing grew more labored with each step. "I've got proof now," he wheezed. "The colored bands, the diverted ambulances, the—" Another coughing fit doubled him over. The camera swung wildly, then steadied. Colum's face filled the frame, closer now. Blood flecked his lips. Lark. His eyes were fever bright. If you see this, they'll try to bury this, like they buried everything else. But you always saw the truth, even when you were little. You never looked away from what was wrong. Tears blurred Lark's vision. She gripped the back of Cassian's chair to stay upright. "I'm sorry I left," Colum continued. "I thought I could protect you and your mother by staying away. But this system, it's killing people, good people, and now—" He broke off, coughing violently. When he looked back at the camera, there was blood on his chin. "They got to me too. Some kind of injection during the last code black. I can feel it. Spreading." The image shook as he slumped against a wall. "The evidence is all here. The names, the dates, everything. You have to finish what I started, baby girl. You have to—" The video cut to static. Lark's legs gave out. She slid to the floor, a keening sound escaping her throat. Cassian knelt beside her, his steady presence anchoring her as the truth crashed over her in waves. "He knew," she choked out. "He was trying to expose them, and they killed him for it." "The official report said heart failure," Cassian said quietly. "Natural causes." "Nothing natural about it." Lark's grief crystallized into rage. "They murdered him. While I was angry at him for abandoning us, he was fighting this evil." She pushed herself to her feet, wiping her eyes roughly. "Play it again. I need to see everything." They watched the video 3 more times. Each viewing revealed new details. The names on the charts Colum filmed, the color-coded wristbands that matched the ones from the garbage bag, the empty nursing stations during what should have been peak hours. "Wait," Lark pointed to a reflection in a window. "There, behind him." Cassian zoomed in. A figure in scrubs moved through the shadows, following Colum. "Can you enhance that?" "This isn't TV," Cassian said. "But—" He adjusted the contrast. "Look at the badge." The blurry image showed a hospital ID card with administrative access, the kind only senior staff carried. "Someone high up was tracking him," Lark said. "They knew he was gathering evidence. And they silenced him." Cassian's voice was grim. "Probably the same people who tried to run you down yesterday." Lark touched the screen where her father's face was frozen in mid-sentence. All those years of anger, of feeling abandoned, and he'd been here, fighting a battle she never knew about. "I need copies of everything," she said. "The video, the ledger page, all of it." "Already done." Cassian held up several thumb drives. "One for you, one for me. One hidden where they'll never find it." "Good." Lark stood straighter, her grief hardening into purpose. "Because this isn't just about exposing corruption anymore. This is about justice, for my father, for every patient they've killed." "They'll come after you harder now," Cassian warned. "They know you have his phone." "Let them come." Lark's voice was steel. "My father died trying to save lives. I won't let that death mean nothing." She took one of the thumb drives, clutching it like a lifeline. "He said I never looked away from what was wrong, and I won't start now." Cassian nodded, understanding the shift in her resolve. This wasn't just a nurse following her conscience anymore. This was a daughter avenging her father, armed with his last testimony and fueled by the love she'd never gotten to express. "We'll need help," he said. "People we can trust completely." "I know who to call." Lark thought of Hugo, of the nurses who'd helped them save the cardiac patient. "People who haven't forgotten what this hospital is supposed to stand for." She watched as Cassian secured the remaining drives and wiped his system. The image of her father's blood-flecked face stayed with her, along with his final words. "They'll try to bury this." But they hadn't counted on his daughter being the one to dig up their secrets. They hadn't counted on her inheriting his determination, his moral compass, his refusal to look away from suffering. "I'm sorry too, Dad," she whispered to his frozen image. "But I'm going to finish what you started, I promise." The tech lab hummed around them, its machines recording and preserving the truth that would bring down an empire of corruption. Outside, the hospital continued its normal rhythms, its darker purpose hidden behind clean walls and professional smiles. But now Lark knew. She knew why her father had left, why he'd died, and what she had to do to honor his sacrifice. The pendant he wore in the video, she had its twin in her jewelry box at home, a gift he'd given her on her 16th birthday. She would wear it now, a reminder of the truth he'd died protecting. The system had taken her father. But his last gift to her was purpose, the chance to fight the battle he'd begun, to save the lives he'd died trying to protect. She was her father's daughter, and she would make them remember his name. The hospital's research library was deserted at 3 o'clock in the morning. Lark's footsteps echoed off the walls as she made her way to the back terminals. Her security badge, still active despite her suspension, granted her access to the old records room. Her hands trembled as she plugged in her father's phone. After discovering his identity in the video, she'd spent hours combing through its contents. Each file was like a punch to the gut, revealing the depth of Column's investigation and the horrifying truth he'd uncovered. "Come on, Dad," she whispered, opening folder after folder. "Show me what got you killed." The screen flickered with spreadsheets, patient records, and secretly recorded conversations. Column had been methodical, documenting everything. She found a folder labeled MM Program and clicked it open. Her breath caught. There it was, in black and white. Mortality Management Initiative, confidential. The document outlined a system designed to optimize patient outcomes through strategic resource allocation. But as Lark read deeper, her horror grew. This wasn't about healthcare. It was about profits. Patient categorization based on insurance status, age, and projected recovery costs, she read aloud, her voice shaking. Priority levels determined at intake, resource diversion during high-volume periods. They weren't just neglecting patients, they were selecting them for death. Her father's notes appeared in the margins. Tilda Bracken implementing quotas, minimum 3% mortality rate required for cost efficiency. Storm nights used as cover. Lark's stomach churned. She'd seen those quotas in action, watched as patients were color-coded and diverted. But she hadn't understood the full scope until now. A new file caught her eye. Surgical Initiative, Phase 2. She opened it, scanning quickly. "No," she whispered. "Oh God, no." The document detailed plans to extend the program to surgical patients. They were scheduling procedures, real operations needed by real patients, but selecting certain cases for anticipated complications. Her eyes locked on a familiar name, Maureen Jennings. The room spun. Her mother's upcoming surgery was listed under quota balancing procedures. They had marked her for death to maintain their statistical averages. Lark's hands clenched into fists. The surgery was scheduled for next week, a routine procedure that thousands of patients underwent safely. But under Tilda's program, it would be anything but routine. She dug deeper into her father's files, finding more evidence of the hospital's deadly scheme. Column had tracked dozens of cases, documenting how healthy patients died from unexpected complications during simple procedures. Surgical errors engineered to appear natural, one note read. Anesthesia adjustments, post-op negligence, all deniable. The dates aligned perfectly with the hospital's financial reports. Each balanced quarter showed improved profit margins, while families buried their loved ones believing they'd just been unlucky. Lark found audio recordings of Column confronting Tilda months before his death. Her father's voice, strong and angry, filled her headphones. "You're playing God with people's lives." "I'm ensuring this hospital's survival," Tilda's cool voice replied. "Sometimes difficult choices must be made for the greater good. There's nothing good about murder." "Such an ugly word, Mr. Reyes. We prefer resource management." The recording ended with Tilda's warning. "Be careful. Accidents happen, especially during our busier nights." Tears streamed down Lark's face as the pieces fell into place. Her father had died trying to expose this. Now they were targeting her mother. Perhaps as a warning, perhaps as simple statistical necessity. She pulled up her mother's surgical file, comparing it to others in the program. The patterns were identical. Patients selected for their demographics, their insurance status, their lack of powerful advocates. "Not this time," Lark whispered. "Not my mother. Not anyone else." She began copying everything. Every file, every recording, every damning piece of evidence her father had collected. Her hands moved quickly, aware that each minute increased the risk of discovery. A noise in the hallway made her freeze. Footsteps approached, then passed. Her heart pounded as she resumed her work. The full scope of Tilda's program was staggering. Hundreds of deaths, all carefully planned and executed to look natural. The code black storm nights were just the most visible part. The program touched every department, every type of care. Her father's final notes showed he'd been close to exposing everything. He'd gathered proof of falsified records, manipulated death certificates, and the complex financial web that made it all profitable. "Following the money," he'd written. "All roads lead to offshore accounts. Board members involved. Need final proof." That proof had died with him in an empty hallway, his last words captured on the phone she now held. Lark found a document dated the day before his death, a draft letter to the state medical board, complete with evidence and witness statements. He'd been ready to blow it all open. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered, touching the screen. "I should have believed in you. I should have helped." But she could help now. She could finish what he started, and save her mother in the process. She checked the surgical schedule again. 6 days. That's all the time she had to stop them from killing her mother and expose the entire system. The sound of a door opening somewhere in the library made her quickly disconnect the phone. She gathered her copies and erased her access logs, heart racing. As she slipped out through the emergency exit, Lark's mind was already forming a plan. She needed allies, people who would believe her, who would help her fight. Her father had died alone, but his daughter wouldn't make the same mistake. She had friends inside the hospital, people who'd already proven their courage. Together they could bring down Tilda's deadly empire. But first, she had to protect her mother. Everything else, justice, exposure, revenge, would have to wait until Maureen was safe. Lark hurried through the dark parking lot, clutching the evidence close. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Sometimes you have to risk everything to do what's right." She was ready to risk it all now. For her mother, for her father's memory, for every patient who deserved better than to be sacrificed on the altar of profit. The night was cold, but Lark's purpose burned hot. She had 6 days to dismantle a killing machine disguised as a hospital. 6 days to honor her father's sacrifice and save her mother's life. She reached her car and looked back at the towering hospital building. Somewhere in those gleaming floors, Tilda Bracken was probably sleeping peacefully, secure in her power and her secrets. "Enjoy it while you can," Lark murmured. "Dad showed me the truth, and I'm his daughter. I don't look away from what's wrong." She started her car, mind racing with plans and possibilities. The war her father had fought in silence was about to become very, very loud. The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the empty hospital basement as Lark spread her father's evidence across a forgotten maintenance desk. Cassian Pike stood beside her, his military-trained eyes scanning each document with methodical precision. The basement's musty air wrapped around them like a protective shroud. "Your father built a solid case," Cassian said, his voice low and steady. "But Tilda's got everything locked down tight upstairs. Digital records, security protocols, backup systems. That's why we need to hit them where they're vulnerable," Lark replied, pulling out a hospital blueprint her father had marked. During a power switch, Hugo Trammell emerged from the shadows of a storage room, his worn maintenance badge catching the dim light. "Been working here 23 years, he said, moving slowly to join them at the desk. "Know every circuit, every breaker. Admin wing's got special backup power, separate from the rest of the hospital." Cassian raised an eyebrow. "Why separate?" "So their computers never go down," Hugo explained, pointing to a section of the blueprint, "even during real emergencies. But the switch..." He traced a line with his weathered finger. "That takes 30 seconds. 30 seconds when everything goes dark before backup kicks in." Lark leaned forward, her eyes bright with purpose. "And during those 30 seconds?" "All their fancy security measures reset," Hugo said, a hint of satisfaction in his tired voice. "Everything unlocks, then relocks. Standard safety protocol." Cassian nodded slowly, understanding dawning on his face. 30 seconds to get into Tilda's office, access her computer. "And copy everything," Lark finished. "All the real records, all the proof of what they've been doing." The three of them huddled closer over the blueprints as Hugo detailed the electrical system. Each breaker location, each backup generator, each security checkpoint. He knew them all like old friends. "Main breaker's here," he said, tapping the paper. "Secondary unit here. Need both to force a proper switch. Timing has to be perfect." Cassian pulled out his phone, checking the security rotation schedule. "I can adjust the guard paths, create a blind spot, but we'll need a distraction." "Already working on that," Lark said, pulling up her own phone. She showed them an email from administration. "Tilda's scheduled a code black drill for dawn tomorrow. Perfect cover for unusual activity." Hugo's eyes narrowed. "Dawn drill's not normal procedure." "No," Lark agreed grimly. "She's planning something, but we can use it. While everyone's focused on the drill protocols, we hit the power," Cassian finished. He studied the blueprint again. "Hugo, how long to reach both breakers?" 3 minutes between them, Hugo replied. "Need to throw them in sequence. Too fast, system locks up. Too slow, alerts go out." Lark checked her watch. "We should practice the timing. Hugo, can you show us the breaker locations now?" They moved through the dim basement corridors, Hugo leading them past humming machinery and wrapped pipes. Each breaker panel looked identical to Lark, but Hugo knew them by heart. "This one first," he said, pointing to a gray metal box. "Then down 2 levels to the sub-basement for the second. Remember, 3 minutes exactly." While they worked out the timing, Lark's mind wandered to her mother. Between planning sessions, she'd slipped into the records department and quietly transferred Maureen's chart off the digital surgery list. A small protection, but crucial. They couldn't operate on a patient who technically wasn't scheduled. "You're sure about this?" Cassian asked, as they walked back to their makeshift command center. "Once we start, there's no going back." Lark thought of her father's final video, of all the patients who had died alone in dark hallways. "I'm sure. We have to stop them." They spent the next hour memorizing routes, checking times, planning for every contingency. Hugo knew which security cameras could be avoided, which doors would stay unlocked during the power switch. Cassian worked out the exact patrol patterns they'd need to dodge. "What about after?" Hugo asked quietly. "Once we have the proof?" "I've got contacts at 3 news stations," Cassian said, "plus a friend at the state medical board. We release everything at once, through multiple channels. They can't bury it all." Lark nodded. "And I've backed up copies of everything we have so far, hidden in places they'll never find." She didn't mention the flash drive she'd mailed to herself at a post office box, or the encrypted files stored on a private server. The basement's silence was broken by the distant sound of footsteps above. They all froze, listening intently until the noise faded. "Dawn tomorrow," Lark said softly. "During the drill. Hugo throws the breakers, I get into Tilda's office, Cassian manages the security feeds." 30 seconds, Hugo reminded her. "That's all you'll have before systems reboot." "I'll be ready." Lark gathered the blueprints, carefully folding them away. "We should separate now. Less suspicious that way." Before they parted, Cassian touched her arm. "Your mother, she's safe?" "Off the surgery schedule," Lark confirmed. "I'll deal with getting her proper care once this is over. Right now, no surgery is safer than their surgery." Hugo nodded gravely. "Be careful tomorrow. Tilda's smart. Dawn drill means she's planning something too." "We'll be ready," Lark assured him, though uncertainty gnawed at her stomach. "Whatever she's planning, she doesn't know what we know. We have that advantage." They split up, taking different exits from the basement. Lark waited until she was alone in her car, before allowing herself to truly feel the weight of what they were attempting. One chance to expose years of systematic murder. One chance to justify her father's sacrifice. One chance to save countless future victims. The dashboard clock read 2:15 in the morning. Less than 4 hours until dawn. Less than 4 hours until they either brought down Tilda's deadly empire or lost everything trying. Lark started her car, the familiar rumble steadying her nerves. They had a solid plan, trusted allies, and the element of surprise. Most importantly, they had the truth on their side, and her father's evidence to prove it. As she drove home through the empty streets, Lark thought of all the families who had lost loved ones to Tilda's mortality management program. They deserved justice. They deserved to know why their parents, siblings, children had died alone in hospital hallways. Tomorrow would change everything. One way or another, the truth would finally come to light. Dawn was coming, and with it, their one chance to make things right. Thunder crashed overhead as Lark crouched in the darkened hallway, her heart pounding against her ribs. Ash pressed close to her leg, his warm presence steadying her nerves. Through the window, lightning illuminated the parking lot in stark flashes, the storm matching the turmoil inside the hospital walls. Her watch read 4:45 in the morning. In 15 minutes, Cassian would cut power to the admin wing. Their plan was in motion. The radio at her hip crackled softly. "Security checkpoint clear," Cassian's voice came through, barely above a whisper. "Moving to position." Lark clicked twice to acknowledge. She and Ash had already mapped their route to records, through the service corridor, past the empty cafeteria, up the back stairs. No cameras would catch them there. Another flash of lightning. Another crash of thunder. The storm was directly overhead now. Perfect cover for what they were about to do. 5 minutes, Hugo's voice whispered through the radio. He was stationed by the main breaker panel, ready to throw the switches in sequence. Lark checked her equipment one last time. Flashlight, USB drive, her father's old ID badge that would still work on the manual door locks. Everything was ready. 2 minutes, Cassian reported. Lark's fingers found the familiar shape of her father's pendant beneath her scrubs. "This is for you, Dad," she whispered. The storm roared outside, rain hammering against the windows. In the distance, a generator hummed to life, preparing for the possibility of weather-related outages. But what was coming wouldn't be stopped by backup power. 30 seconds, Hugo said. Lark took a deep breath. Ready, boy, she murmured to Ash. His ears pricked forward, sensing her tension. 10 seconds. She counted down in her head. 3, 2, 1. The lights went out. Darkness flooded the corridors. For a moment there was absolute silence. Then, chaos erupted. Alarms blared as backup systems tried to engage. Voices called out in confusion. Footsteps echoed as staff members moved through the darkness, looking for flashlights, checking on patients. Now, Lark whispered to Ash. They moved swiftly through the darkness, her hand on his collar guiding them both. The service corridor was pitch black, but they'd practiced this route until they could walk it blindfolded. Through her earpiece, she heard Cassian directing security teams away from their position. Possible breach in the East Wing, he announced officially. All units respond. They reached the stairs. Lark's flashlight beam showed only what was directly ahead, exactly as planned. Up they went, past the second floor, past the third, to the administrative level where records was housed. The backup generators hadn't kicked in here. Hugo had made sure of that. Only emergency lighting cast a dim red glow through the hallways. Perfect for what they needed to do. Outside records, Lark swiped her father's old ID badge. The manual lock clicked open. Inside, rows of filing cabinets waited in the darkness. But she wasn't here for paper files. Moving quickly, she found the main computer terminal. The USB drive contained Hugo's program, a simple script to copy everything without leaving traces. She plugged it in and started the download. 5 minutes until systems reboot, Cassian warned in her ear. Lark moved to the filing cabinets while the download ran. She knew exactly what she was looking for. The physical ledgers Tilda kept as backup. The ones that documented every code black death for the past 3 years. Thunder boomed overhead as she worked. Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating the room in stark bursts. Her fingers found what she needed. 3 black binders, each labeled with innocent-looking dates that corresponded to the worst storms, the highest death counts. 3 minutes, came the warning. The USB download completed with a soft chime. Lark pocketed the drive and the ledgers, but they weren't done yet. Ready for Phase 2, she radioed. Broadcasting in 30 seconds, Cassian confirmed. Lark and Ash moved to the hallway. Any moment now. The emergency screens throughout the hospital flickered to life. Every monitor, every display panel, every digital signboard, all showing the same image. Her father's face, drawn with pain but determined, speaking his final words. My name is Colum Reyes, his voice echoed through the corridors. I'm recording this because people are dying at Haviland Regional. Not from their injuries or illnesses, but from deliberate neglect. I've seen the orders, seen the color coding system they use. During storms, during what they call Code Black, they choose who lives and who dies based on insurance and cost analysis. The hospital fell silent except for her father's voice and the storm outside. I'm making this record because they'll try to bury this truth, just like they'll try to bury me. But the evidence exists, the ledgers exist. The proof is in the numbers, in the patterns of deaths during storms. Look at the records. Look at the truth. Don't let them... The video cut off there, the point where her father had died, alone in that hallway. But the impact was immediate. Staff members stood frozen in the corridors, staring at the screens. Patients and visitors who were awake watched in horror. The truth was out, impossible to ignore. For one perfect moment, victory seemed within reach. Then Tilda's voice cut through the silence, sharp and controlled over the hospital's PA system. Attention all staff. We are experiencing a security breach. All operating room floors are now in lockdown. Security teams to stations. This is not a drill. Metal shutters began sliding down over the OR floor access points. Lark's blood ran cold. Her mother was up there, somewhere in the maze of surgical prep rooms, waiting for a procedure that was never meant to save her. "Cassian," she radioed urgently, "I need a way up to the OR floor, now." "Working on it," he replied, tension in his voice. "But Lark, they're sealing everything. Whatever Tilda's planning—" "I know," she cut him off. "But my mother's up there, and I won't let them take anyone else." The storm raged outside as Lark and Ash raced through the corridors, searching for a way up. Behind them, her father's voice continued to play on every screen, his final testimony echoing through a hospital that could no longer hide from the truth. They had won the first battle. But the war wasn't over yet. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the determined set of Lark's jaw as she ran. The evidence was out. The truth was exposed. Now she just had to survive long enough to make sure justice was served. Thunder crashed overhead, and somewhere above them, metal doors continued to seal, trapping everyone inside the OR floors with whatever Tilda had planned. In the stark, fluorescent light of the OR floor's command center, Tilda's heels clicked against the tile as she strode toward Dr. Sloan. Her face was a mask of cold determination. "Proceed with Maureen Jennings's surgery immediately," she ordered, her voice sharp as a scalpel. Dr. Sloan's hands trembled as he adjusted his glasses. "But the anesthesiologist isn't scheduled for another hour." "Now, Cal." Tilda's eyes narrowed. "We need this particular loose end tied up before anyone starts asking questions. Make it look natural, a common surgical complication." Meanwhile, 3 floors below, Lark and Cassian raced through the maze of locked corridors. Cassian's security badge flashed red at each card reader they tried. "They've locked me out of the system," he growled, slamming his palm against the wall. "We need another way up." "The service elevator," Lark said, already moving. "Hugo showed me the maintenance override." They sprinted down the hallway, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. The storm's fury rattled the windows, matching the urgency in Lark's chest. Every second counted. As they rounded the corner toward the service area, a large figure stepped out from the shadows. Marcus, one of Tilda's loyal orderlies, blocked their path. His massive frame filled the narrow hallway. "Going somewhere?" he sneered, advancing toward Lark. Cassian moved to intercept, but Marcus was faster. His meaty hand shot out, grabbing Lark's throat and slamming her against the wall. Stars exploded behind her eyes as her head cracked against the concrete. But before Marcus could tighten his grip, a flash of fur and fury launched through the air. Ash's powerful jaws clamped down on the orderly's forearm. Marcus howled, releasing Lark as he tried to shake off the determined German shepherd. "Good boy, Ash." Lark gasped, rubbing her throat as Cassian tackled Marcus from behind. "Go!" Cassian shouted, struggling to pin the larger man. "I've got him. Save your mother." Lark hesitated for just a moment, then whistled for Ash. Together they sprinted toward the service elevator. Her hands shook as she pried open the control panel and input Hugo's override code. The ancient elevator groaned to life. Come on," she muttered as they ascended, each floor passing with agonizing slowness. Finally, the doors opened onto the surgical floor. The normally bustling hallway was eerily quiet. Through the window of OR3, Lark saw a nightmare unfolding. Her mother lay unconscious on the operating table, already intubated. Dr. Sloan stood over her, scalpel in hand, while a nurse methodically disconnected monitoring equipment. Another staff member was at the oxygen panel, slowly turning the valve to reduce the flow. "Stop!" Lark burst through the doors, Ash at her heels. "Get away from her!" Dr. Sloane's hand jerked, the scalpel clattering to the sterile floor. "Lark, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," she snarled, rushing to reconnect the monitors. "You're going to kill her to cover up Tilda's body count." The nurse backed away, hands raised. "Dr. Sloane, she's got proof. The video's playing everywhere downstairs." Sloane's shoulders sagged. The weight of years of compliance seemed to crush him. "I never wanted anyone to die," he whispered. "But Tilda, she has ways of making things happen. Careers destroyed, licenses revoked, families ruined." "That ends tonight," Lark declared, checking her mother's vitals. She could hear Maureen's steady breathing, see the rise and fall of her chest. They hadn't succeeded in cutting off her oxygen yet. Ash growled low in his throat, positioning himself between Lark and the door. The warning came just in time. Tilda appeared in the doorway, her elegant suit incongruous with the fury in her eyes. "You stupid sentimental girl," she hissed. "Do you have any idea how many people I've had to remove to keep this system working? One more won't make a difference." She reached into her jacket, but before she could withdraw whatever weapon she carried, alarms began blaring throughout the building. Emergency lights strobed red and white as a familiar voice echoed over the PA system. "Attention all personnel," Cassian's steady voice announced. "This is a Code 7. Police and federal agents are entering the building. All staff are ordered to remain at their stations. I repeat, this is a Code 7. Tilda's face contorted with rage, but before she could act, another alarm joined the cacophony. The fire suppression system engaged, emergency lights casting wild shadows across the OR. Through the chaos, Lark could hear the pounding of boots in the hallway. Help was coming, but her mother needed her now. "Get out," she commanded, her voice carrying the steel of certainty. The nurses fled, leaving only Dr. Sloane, who hesitated by the door. "The ventilator's offline," he said quietly. "She needs—" "I know what she needs," Lark snapped, already reaching for the manual resuscitation bag. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, attaching it to her mother's breathing tube. Squeeze, release, squeeze, release, the rhythm as natural as her own heartbeat. Through the observation window, she saw Hugo racing past, his maintenance keys jingling as he triggered more emergency overrides. Cassian's voice continued to boom through the PA system, directing first responders to key areas of the hospital. Keeping one hand steady on the ventilation bag, Lark used her free hand to pull her father's body cam from her pocket. The same model he'd worn that fatal night, now ready to record everything. She clipped it to her scrubs, the little red light blinking to life. The ledgers lay scattered where she'd dropped them, their damning contents splashed across the floor. But they didn't matter now. She had something better. She had living proof of their attempted murder, and her mother's scheduled mortality management would be their undoing. "Stay with me, Mom," she whispered, continuing the steady rhythm of manual ventilation. Each breath she provided was an act of defiance, each squeeze of the bag a declaration. No more deaths, no more cover-ups, no more silence. Through the chaos of alarms and shouting, Lark stood firm. She'd fought her way through their locked doors and lies. Now she was ready for whatever came next. The emergency doors burst open as police and paramedics flooded the hallway. Lark stepped out of the OR, where another nurse had taken over ventilating her mother. Her body cam blinked steadily as she faced the growing crowd. "Everyone needs to see this," she announced, her voice carrying down the corridor. She held up her phone, playing Column's final video on maximum volume. Her father's desperate words echoed through the suddenly silent hallway. Tilda tried to push through the crowd. "This is unauthorized." "Marion Chen," Lark cut her off, reading from the ledger, age 62. Redirected during the January storm. Thomas Weber, age 48, Patricia Santos, age 35, all marked for mortality management because they couldn't pay. Dr. Sloane's face had gone ashen. Behind him, Cassian held up his own phone, live streaming everything to the state health board and police department. These weren't accidents, Lark continued, her voice steady. This was policy. Every code black night, more patients disappeared, including my father, Colum Reyes, when he tried to expose it. The crowd of nurses and doctors had grown, their faces showing horror and recognition. Some began nodding, finally free to acknowledge what they'd seen. Tilda's composure cracked. You have no proof. Actually, Cassian spoke up, we have everything. The ledgers, the security footage, the fake charts, all streaming live right now to the authorities. Dr. Sloane sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. I just followed orders, he whispered. I convinced myself. Tilda's eyes darted to the phones recording her, the body cam on Lark's scrubs, the growing crowd of witnesses. Her carefully constructed system was crumbling in real time, exposed to the harsh light of truth. They were people, Lark said firmly. Not numbers, not costs, and now everyone knows. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of flashing lights and official statements. Police officers led Tilda Bracken away in handcuffs, her perfectly pressed suit wrinkled for the first time anyone could remember. She kept her head high, but her eyes betrayed her defeat as federal agents seized boxes of records from her office. Dr. Sloane faced the hospital board in a closed-door session that lasted 5 hours. When he emerged, his white coat was gone, along with his title and medical privileges. Unlike Tilda, he walked out with slumped shoulders, the weight of his choices finally breaking his practiced composure. In the recovery ward, Maureen opened her eyes to find Lark holding her hand. My brave girl, she whispered, her voice still rough from the breathing tube. Just like your father. Over the following weeks, Lark worked closely with state investigators and patient advocacy groups. Her testimony helped piece together years of systematic abuse. Other hospitals across the country began internal reviews, afraid of similar schemes in their own halls. One quiet morning, Lark stood before her father's gravestone. The autumn air was crisp, and fallen leaves crunched under her feet. Ash sat faithfully beside her, his warm presence steady and protective as always. She lifted Colum's pendant from its small velvet box. The silver chain caught the morning light as she fastened it around her neck. Her fingers traced the familiar pattern, a small caduceus, symbol of healing. I understand now, Dad, she said softly. Why you couldn't walk away, why you kept fighting. Ash leaned against her leg as she placed fresh flowers by the stone. No one gets to decide who deserves to live, she continued, touching the pendant. Not anymore. Not here. The pendant rested against her heart, a constant reminder of the truth she'd uncovered and the lives she'd save going forward. Her father's courage had become her own, transforming grief into purpose. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.